Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming into the show. Thank you for listening to us audio only on the Believe Network, wherever you get your podcasts, listening to us on SiriusXM. And also, if you're checking out the full video right now on Sports Talk Chicago, thank you so much to Sports Talk Chicago for showing Believe in Bears all year long in 2023. Fantastic episode coming up. So let's bring in our guest. He's a good friend of the show. He hasn't been on this season. I love having him on, getting his perspectives. He is Falcons insider and also host of Believe in Falcons. It's Will McFadden. What's up, Will?
What's up, Joey? Oh, man, I found that intro so fascinating because I love to see how other hosts read the Bet Online scripts. And yours was definitely upbeat, faster paced. There was a little bit of auctioneer, real radio DJ to that.
Who's ready?
That was a blast, man. How you doing? I'm excited now.
What is it? All rights reserved. All rights.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like the sped up end of when you're reading the legal in the commercial. Yeah.
We're doing good over here in Believe in Bears. Things are as polarizing as ever with a bunch of different topics that we're obviously going to get into in today's show. But again, not to say that the Chicago Bears are playing meaningful football, even though they have a mathematical chance to make the playoffs. But again, another interesting matchup against a team that has plenty to play for, your team, the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to get to them in a second. We're going to do a little Bears talk off the top. I'm just kind of curious, though, from an outsider's perspective, we spend so much time in our own little silos here of Beardom. I would just love to get your perspective on what you've seen, what you heard, and what you think about the Chicago Bears team this season under Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned kind of the draft of it all, the Falcons still having something to play for, all of that. Like, I think the Bears are in such an interesting and kind of sweet spot, right? Because of the Carolina trade and knowing where the Panthers are, you can kind of live in both worlds, and you can sit there and say, hey, look, like we like where we're at with that number one pick. Hopefully it stays that way down the stretch. And you can also kind of say we need to get this team going under Eberflus and build some of that momentum at the end of the season and get things where you feel just positive about the team kind of rolling into the end of the year here. So I like kind of the fan position that y'all are in, even though the year's not going the way you want it to. And there is the whole Justin Fields of it all. You do almost get to have your cake and eat it too, in terms of if you're rooting for one side or the other. I do a piece for the Falcaholic.com where I kind of scout ahead the remaining opponents that the Falcons play. And so, for a while, I've been just paying attention to the Bears as one of the teams on the schedule. And I really, really like the defense. I've liked the defense all year. I think, TJ Edwards, Terrell Edmonds, Jalen Johnson, Montez Sweat, the addition of him, has been awesome. Like, just to see how he has exploded the last few weeks. I know the Falcons were kind of in on him, and I can't help but think of the difference that maybe he could have made in a game or two here. Just that they don't have that type of pass rusher yet. So I do think there's a lot to like about what Chicago has done defensively this year. But then you just look at the inconsistency on offense and just the little streaks that they'll go through when it seems like everything's clicking. And DJ Moore is one of the most dangerous receivers in the game. And you've got a run game that is kind of any back can get in there and get their yardage. And it's a little bit reminiscent of, like what the Falcons have had in recent years. But again, there's just not been that consistency, I think, at the quarterback position. And Falcons fans, know a lot about that, certainly this year. But it's a little more disappointing when you are, I think, as far along with Justin Fields as Chicago is, because, it seems like it's coming to an end sooner rather than later. And I don't think it has lived up to the expectation and the excitement that a lot of people had when he was drafted.
You're bringing up so many great points, and it brings up something that I wanted to ask you about, because I feel like maybe the Falcons or Falcons fans are in a similar position of, we often mistake in the NFL the preseason optimism versus the regular season reality. And what I mean by that is the Chicago Bears started the season 0-4. And look, man, I was on every single show calling for Matt Eberflus's head. Should we be looking at closer to Ryan Poles? Blow this team up. This is terrible. They came out unprepared. They came out of the season, honestly, not very healthy, but the backups weren't ready to play. There's a lack of energy, lack of execution. They played terribly. And you're right, over this last second half of the season, the defense is completely turned around. It does look like a unit that you can build on moving forward in the future, and the optimism is building up on that side. But my question for you is, if the Chicago Bears, I had the Chicago Bears, I picked them at the beginning of the season to win 8 games. And I'm not sure what you had the Falcons winning in the preseason. And when I make that pick, I say, look, 8 games, gosh, that doesn't sound so bad. It's going to be competitive. We're going to win some games. We're going to have some close ones. We're going to feel this way, that way. And then when you get into the muck of it, when you get to that 7 or 8 win mark, it just doesn't feel quite the same that you feel like it would be in the preseason. 7 or 8 wins is not a great place to be in the organization. Do you feel that way a little bit with the Falcons where, hey, this team can compete and be 500, but the journey to get there maybe it was a little bit more painful than perhaps you thought in the preseason?
Man, you are hitting on something that is so fascinating, but so real, because you know what I like, what I think it is when we get to the off season, our brains do this weird thing where we flip from the immediate and the micro to the macro, and you look at more of the longer term. All right, well, who are the cornerstones to build around? And then you get to the draft and the young pieces, and it becomes more of a project, a longer term project, and the state of the franchise. And what we forget when we're talking about these teams in training camp and we're just excited to have football back and everything's a little rosy, you forget that when the NFL season starts, you live and you die based on what happens the Sunday of each week. Like there is no way to, it seems, remember that agony of just, wow, this season, mark it right here. This is the start of it falling apart. We have 16 more weeks of misery. My life is hell. Like, what is going on? It's just, you forget that in the offseason. And so, yeah, when you're sitting here saying, I think it's going to be a year of progress. I think they're going to go 7-10, but we'll be feeling good at the end of the year. No, you won't. In week 12, you're going to be sitting here going, fire everybody. They stink. Get rid of the quarterback. We need to blow it all up. Like, I think I had the Falcons going 10-6. It was either 10-6 or 11-5, but 11-5 feels a little more optimistic than I usually am. So let's say 10-6. I did not see another. And right now, if they did not win another game, they would be 7-10 for the 3rd year in a row. The first 2 years under Arthur Smith, 7-10 was probably an overachievement. I think that's definitely fair to say. This year, 7-10 is an underachievement for sure. And the thing that I didn't see coming was the fervor with which the kind of fire Arthur Smith crowd ramped things up and how quickly that happened and early in the year. I mean, really like week 6, 7, 5, like that London game against Jacksonville, which was a back-to-back loss and kind of a second bad loss, you really started to see people disgruntled like early. And the Falcons had won their first 2 games that season. Like they were 4-4. It's not crazy, right? And that has just lasted all year long. So that's how you get to this point where in year 3, the Falcons miss kind of the mark in terms of expectations, I think, for the first time. And you're already seeing, okay, should the coach get fired? I think in a lot of other places that would be a little bit premature, but that's just where we're at. And yeah, it's because it feels so disappointing, even though there are a lot of things to like about what the Falcons have done. It's just not all come together in the way people thought.
Yeah, it's just such a funny way to move through sports because honestly, yeah, as it sits here, the Chicago Bears finished 7-10. It's been hell. It's been really painful. But as we move into the offseason, there are going to be a lot of narratives out there that say, well, Matt Eberflus doubled his win record from the year previous, and he should come back and coach the team because he got 4 more wins than the 3 that he got the previous year. And we're supposed to equate that with feeling good about ourselves.
Yeah, is this Vanderbilt? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, no, it's a difficult place to figure things out. It's sort of the same situation of, not to excuse it because there's still problems, but when Chicago Bears fans, bitch about the offensive line, well, there's 20 other NFL teams that aren't really happy with their offensive lines too is either. When we have a problem with coaching, as you mentioned in Atlanta, they're calling for the same stuff that we're calling for with Eberflus. There's 10 other teams in the NFL right now that aren't necessarily happy with their head coaches. So it's not always necessarily a Bears problem. It's a little bit about trying to find solutions through this NFL to get to that upper echelon. While everyone's sort of packed into the middle, which I think our 2 teams are a little bit. So before we move over to the Falcons, I want to try and bridge the gap a little bit. A big reason why I wanted to have you on was not just because the Bears are playing the Falcons in Chicago this week, playoff implications for the Falcons, minor ones for the Chicago Bears, but the future of the Chicago Bears has a particular tie into Atlanta. And by that, I mean, I said this back in September when we were 0-4. My co-host, the great Corey Wooten, is a big Justin Fields fan. In his opinion, he says that he has done enough to remain the Chicago Bears quarterback in the future moving forward, and to either take Marvin Harrison Jr. or trade the number 1 pick for a bevy of other draft capital and roll forward with Justin. Back in week 4, and I still kind of feel this way, is that I still think that the Bears organization at this time is leaning towards moving on from Justin Fields. We'll get to my opinion on it in a second, but at the time I said, the perfect landing spot for him, I thought, was the Atlanta Falcons. I think that it's a really interesting spot with the offensive pieces that make a lot of sense. Obviously, he's from the Georgia area. It feels like it could possibly be a fit as a trade partner in the offseason. My first question for you before you weigh in on how you feel about that is that something that Atlanta Falcons fans talk about? Is that in the narrative? Is that in the sphere on the Reddit chats about Justin Fields possibly becoming an Atlanta Falcon? And what would you think of that move if Atlanta wanted to go out and inquire about his services?
Yeah, it's absolutely something that people talk about down here. I mean, he is the local kid, obviously went to Georgia for 1 year before transferring out. So he would, I think, be welcomed back by a lot of people with open arms, right? And he is, and this is still a huge factor. I mean, I think it's probably underrated amongst people outside of Atlanta how big and how popular Michael Vick still is in terms of a football kind of figure and just the style of play and how he not only influenced the league, but like he influenced everything that like Falcons fans really want in a player. And so Justin Fields is much, much closer to a Michael Vick than anybody they've had since Michael Vick. So for those reasons, yes, like he would put butts in seats. He would be very popular, I think, immediately, if that is the route that the Falcons decided to go. I pre-draft in that draft, we heard rumblings that Justin Fields was kind of a popular player with Arthur Blank, the owner here in Atlanta. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a connection like that makes sense. And, I used to be a little bit, I think, hesitant to the idea that Justin Fields or Lamar Jackson or somebody like that would be the quarterback here in Atlanta, just based on what I thought Arthur Smith's offense was kind of looking for. Last year with Marcus Mariota, that was more a product of, I think, necessity, right? The way the Matt Ryan stuff went down, the Deshaun Watson kind of getting in the thick of that and then losing him supposedly at the last second. Like, I feel like Marcus Mariota was a little bit of a plan D for Atlanta at quarterback last offseason. And so the offense they built, I commend them for. And I just don't think it's the one that ideally Arthur Smith wants to run. But then you fast forward this year to Desmond Ridder, and that just doesn't work the way we all expect. And that made me perhaps change my thinking a little bit and say, okay, well, we saw what an offense can be when you add that extra running element at the quarterback position and just how it changes the math. And it made Atlanta's run game one of the most dominant in the NFL, right? It's dropped off a little bit. And I do think the quarterback position has something to do with that. So Justin Fields would absolutely bring that element, but I do think it's still a little bit of a 50-50 thing for me, because what we saw from Taylor Heineke this past Sunday in Atlanta was just the veteran savvy of running an offense, play in and play out, and knowing that, okay, it's 2nd and 8. I just need to get 4 yards here. So whether that's me running it out of bounds or it's drop off to the check down, like, the element of Arthur Smith's offense that's been lacking is that savviness. And I don't know if that's the part of Justin Fields' game that feels like it's missing at times. Just that awareness of like, all right, we're gaming, we're balling, and here's what we're doing. And you're making those winning plays, even if it's not the kind of biggest home run one. So yeah, I think Justin Fields would be welcomed in down here. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around whether that's something the Falcons will actually really pursue.
Right. And And I think from the Chicago Bears side, I mean, I think they maybe have made up their mind a little bit, but I still think that there's 2 games to play and they want to see how it rolls out. Now, here's my big thing with Justin Fields. I think you're bringing up a really interesting point where I think for him personally, he has a hard time recognizing NFL Open. So he still thinks of it as college open, as in the guy makes his break and then he sees the literal separation between the defender and the receiver, and then he goes, I can throw the football. It's been a big problem in his career. It continues to dog him a little bit at times. The other big problem with it too is that he is a big game hunter, right? He wants to extend the play for 2 reasons. 1, so he could throw the ball down the field. 2, he's so explosive outside of the pocket. You know, even Justin Fields haters have to admit that when he gets outside of the pocket, he does make plays with his arm and with his legs too as well, and he's always looking for that. So what I always say is it's that 2.5 seconds after the ball is snapped, him making better decisions in those 2.5 seconds and making life easy for him on those 4-yard pickups. It's something that he doesn't continuously has trouble grasping. Now, to his credit, you could say what you want about Justin Fields because he has a lot of things that still are wanting in his game, as in you don't get those easy little 4-yard completions. That's how the dude isn't throwing for 250 passing yards a game, because Kirk Cousins does that 10 times a game and gets those extra 40 to 50 yards just peppering the football and moving the chains. Justin has to work on that. He has a little bit of some fumbling issues, but here's the thing. Justin Fields continuously improves every single season. A little bit. Now, it might not be at the pace that a lot of people want. You'll hear a lot of stuff about, well, it's been 3 years. We should see it by now. He's only 24 years old. I think there is a really interesting question to be asked about how the college game is played and implemented today, and how these guys come out, and maybe they need to take a little bit more time of a maturation process in the NFL than maybe the 30 starts that we arbitrarily come up with in our head that says whether a quarterback is worthy or not.
That's just it's a harder argument when you have CJ Stroud from the exact same school, right? Like that.
It's very true. It's very true. And look, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, look, CJ Stroud's on my fantasy team. I've watched a ton of him this season. He's looked fantastic, but like, let's also be honest here. It's still his rookie year, right? You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying he will regress. I'm not saying he will ascend. I mean, let's play it out a little bit more. And
I apologize. I'm sure you've heard that a billion times. Like, that comparison is so easy. So it's low hanging fruit. And I apologize. Not throwing shade, but yeah.
No. What's interesting about that, honestly, is we love DJ Moore so much that we are not lamenting passing on CJ Stroud at this time. You don't really hear that too much in Bears circles. What you're hearing now is, and this is probably the question I want to present to you, is the hardest part that I'm having right now of whether or not the Bears should move on from Justin Fields is I hear a lot from experts, analysts, Bears fans, people commenting down below watching this video right now, is that the Chicago Bears need to move on from Justin Fields because they have the number 1 pick. And what I would personally would like to hear a little bit more of, there's a contrast here, is the Bears need to move on from Justin Fields because they're going to draft Caleb Williams, right? We're not hearing a ton of that. We're hearing it because of, well, we have the number 1 pick. This is what you do. You know, you mean pull a lever, draft a quarterback. This is what you're supposed to do. I understand that completely. The part that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is that, is Caleb Williams, in your opinion, an undeniable number 1 pick? I mean, it should be because it's Caleb Williams, not because it's just because you have the number 1 pick. Number 1 picks have been Baker Mayfield, go down the list. Where do you land on Caleb Williams right now? And where do you land on the philosophy of where the Bears might be sitting with this number 1 pick versus Justin Fields?
So if I'm understand, like, to you, it's about conviction, right? It's not just, we're moving on because we have this card in our hand. You want to be like
the player, not the scenario. Tell me more about the player and stop telling me about the scenario here.
I got you. I don't know if that'll ever happen. Like, teams just are going to say that because they're just going to hold it close to the vest. But I totally get what you're saying. And I think that Caleb Williams, and I haven't really dug into everything yet. But I've watched Caleb Williams, of course, right? USC was one of the most fun teams. Well, not this past year, but 2 years ago, they were definitely more fun than this past year, but on the
They
TV
give it up
all
on
the
both
time.
sides.
And
Points on both
and I
sides.
mean, and Drake London coming from USC, so I was familiar with Caleb Williams from watching kind of his tape a little bit, and I think that you see the ceiling is as high as any of these really, really elite prospects, and the question marks are different question marks than what you got with Bryce Young last year, right? Which are certainly much, much more concerning than, all right, well, he's got some of these maybe mechanical issues that he has been able to get away with at the college level because he just is so naturally talented, exactly in the same way of Patrick Mahomes, right? But if that is your comparison, and when you kind of are doing the little lottery and somebody and the quarterback traits all pop up and you're like, oh, wow, that's an amazing set of skills all in one player. We want to gamble on that. I think that if you've got the number one pick, shoot high, right? That's not necessarily the time to say, all right, the floor is really high, unless you're talking about an Andrew Luck, right? But that's what made Andrew Luck. Everybody knew he was going to be great, and he had such a high ceiling. I think when you're looking at Caleb Williams, the ceiling is that of an Andrew Luck. It is that of a Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's very, very high. It's higher than Trevor Lawrence, right? Even though he was in that conversation. So I think that that's worth betting on. And that's ultimately, if this was last year's draft and they had the number one pick, like, I don't know if that's necessarily when you're saying let's move on from Justin Fields at that time. I still, when it comes to the Justin Fields decision, it's just tough based on what you've seen. Like, you've seen it with him at quarterback, and yeah, you can see the improvement, but ultimately, like, you got to win these games, and you can look at a defense that has played well, and you do have nice pieces in the backfield, even though they kind of can't stay healthy all at the same time. And DJ Moore is an alpha at receiver. You can surround him more, but Cole Kmet's a nice option. Like, there are pieces, and you do wonder if could a little bit of a different change, a little bit of a different style at quarterback, maybe just fit it all a little bit better, right? So that's why this decision is so hard. I think I would lean a little bit more towards saying that Caleb Williams is, and this phrase gets used way too often, but like a generational type of prospect. I don't know what that means anymore when every single draft has like 4 generational prospects. But as far as generational prospects go, he's the generationaliest. I don't know. There you go.
Yeah, it reminds me of Star Trek. Generations, plural, many generations, all overlapping each other. Quick follow-up, just in your opinion. I mean, look, I'm with you, man. I've watched every single USC Caleb Williams game, but I haven't really dove into the tape like I'm going to in the off season. To be honest with you, as it stands right now, without me going and doing the full deal in this off season, I'm probably picking Justin Fields over Drake May. But I just want to get your take really quick. Where Caleb Williams, his footwork isn't great, and his size scares me. Does the size mean anything to you with Caleb Williams? That's the one part that has me also hesitant as well.
Refresh me. What's his height and weight?
They're saying he's 6'1", but there's no chance that he's 6'1". He's probably going to come in closer to 6 feet,
but that's right. But he's more like Russell Wilson-y, right? So I think that type of build doesn't really, like a Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson. Like, if you've got a little bit more like thickness to you. And I think Caleb Williams has that build, certainly, than being slighter and slender like a Drew Brees or a Kyler Murray or a Bryce Young. I think it doesn't worry me that much from kind of like a physicality standpoint.
Final one on this topic, and then we're going to preview Bears Falcons this week. The rumor would be, if the Bears were to talk to the Atlanta Falcons about trading Justin Fields, it would be for a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick. Does that make sense to you? Does that a price align with probably what would be something that would interest you as a Falcons analyst?
I think that would be, acceptable, because if you look at what they were supposedly like kind of looking at trading for Montez Sweat, I think it was going to be multiple, maybe 2 2nd round picks, a 2nd and a 3rd, something like that. So, I mean, to get a quarterback, that's not the worst. I think it's more the contract aspect of it all. And it's not just the draft pick investment, but then it's how much of your salary cap you're locking up into one position, which is something that, Arthur Blank has spoken about in the past. They've done research into, teams that have X percentage wrapped up in a single player and a quarterback. Those teams don't win the Super Bowl, right? The teams that win the Super Bowl are usually right around this number. Like the Falcons have done research on that. So they're going to be very cognizant of not overpaying a quarterback, which is part of the reason why I do wonder, about some of these big name quarterbacks. Like, are they going to get kind of the next young guy who's moving and just is going to get a big deal soon? I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, well, and honestly, that's another reason why I am still sort of, sticking around on maybe keeping Justin Fields, because when you talk about the contract, everyone's like, well, you're going to have to pay him in 2 years, which is factual. You're going to have to pay him big money. But the most interesting aspect about what the Chicago Bears have is with this Carolina Panthers pick, with this number 1 pick, what they did last year was they traded it. And instead of CJ Stroud, they got DJ Moore and they got Darnell Wright. So DJ Moore was on a great deal. He's on $17 million a year, but Darnell Wright's on a rookie contract instead of giving over $20 million a year to Mike McGlinchey. So in my opinion, it is an interesting dance that general manager Ryan Poles is going to have to figure out, what kind of steps he wants to do with this one, particularly where if you do keep Justin Fields, you can still trade the number 1 pick and get so much draft capital. And hopefully the idea is also to draft starters. And if you do draft starters at ththat's salary cap is going there, right? So it offsets itself where you're paying the quarterback, but you have a bunch of other people on rookie deals. It's kind of like, which one do you want to have? Would you rather have a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract and spending money in free agency on the 27, 28-year-old, cornerbacks and stuff like that, which we've seen hasn't worked in the past or can be a little dicey? Or would you rather just maybe pay your quarterback and get a bunch of draft capital coming back that you can then get a bunch of other people on rookie deals? I mean, it's advantageous for Ryan Poles, but man, can you imagine? I mean, this is really for the Chicago Bears. This is a huge pivot point in history. The Trubisky pick set us back to right now, which was 7 years, right? And we're at it again. Where, you can just wrap your head around it. I mean, this is a huge offseason for the Chicago Bears because it could, again, set them back another 7 years if they get this wrong.
Yeah, and I think the other element is partially an identity crisis, right? The Bears, if they're going to buy into Justin Fields, then they need to, I think, fully buy in and look at what, and this is easy to say because they look like the best team in the NFL right now, but look at what Baltimore did with Lamar. I don't think Lamar is the leading candidate for MVP right now on 29 other teams, because I just frankly don't know if enough coaches are able to put aside an ego, or able to be smart enough, creative enough to say, look, we've got this unique diamond, and so what works for everybody else isn't going to work for this diamond, right? And so I think Justin Fields, when you look at some of these extremely athletic and versatile players, it's like Isaiah Simmons was one of my favorite defensive players coming out a few draft classes ago. And I was like, this guy can do literally everything. He's going to be so good in the NFL. He's just he's just not been the player that I thought he was going to be. And I don't know if coaches in the league don't know how to use these guys that have just rare blends of athleticism and talent and stuff like that. And I kind of look at Justin Fields in the same way. If you don't pair him with maybe the right coach who sees, oh, this is your superpower, right? It may not be it may not be when we just think of mobility purely, like straight end speed, no, but it's mobility in this way, or it's the way that when you read this route, you do it better than anybody else. You just need to pair him with kind of that right guy. And that's not to say that that's not on the staff currently, or that they're not working, because surely they do know that. But if you're talking about trading away the opportunity to not only start again at quarterback, but to start again with a rookie contract, while you have an asset that is still somewhat valuable and marketable, and you could trade and get draft capital back, and you trade away that 1 pick to get a lot more, you could really go the route of, we're going cheap and young, and we're using these draft picks to either then get veterans, or we're just drafting and kind of building everything up and we're going to have a lot of free agency flexibility. That's interesting. You just need to make sure that you know that Justin Fields, that you know exactly what you're going to do with him and that it's going to work, because then you've got a lot of young players who may not be in a successful situation to begin with. And then that's hard. And then maybe you taint the kind of joy and that young kind of class all coming up together and being a little bit of the promise group. So they definitely need to get this offseason right for sure.
And there's also a parallel out there in the NFL that, and Corey talks about it all the time, is that Justin Fields, he sees a lot of comparables. He sees a lot of interesting parallels between him and Jalen Hurts. And if you kind of look at Jalen Hurts too as well, when Jalen Hurts got an opportunity, didn't play super great, didn't have a lot of offensive weapons. What was he throwing to, like Quintez Watkins or whatever? Fulgham. He was throwing to Fulgham there towards the end, and he had Dallas Goedert. And that a lot of the ways mimicked and was reminiscent of Justin Fields' rookie year. Now last year, now this year they got DJ Moore, which is basically the Devontae Smith. And if you look at Jalen Hurts' numbers with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, they improved a little bit, but they weren't super impressive. And then that year after, when they trade for a guy like A.J. Brown, he's really the rug that ties the room together. All of a sudden, not only did Jalen Hurts' numbers go up, obviously the rushing touchdowns is what he's really known for, but then obviously the whole offense really works and everything starts really humming. So that's the other side of the Bears equation, is if you add the DJ Moore, who's the Devontae Smith, you've got the tight end. If you went out and got a guy like Marvin Harrison, who's supposed to be the A.J. Brown type, and you see that particular type of leap, that's also another fantasy that Chicago Bears fans have a little bit. And let's be honest, and this is just factual, I like Justin Fields a lot, but his consistency as a passer is the only, his inconsistency as a passer is the only thing that doesn't have the Chicago Bears primed in one of the most healthiest, promising positions any other NFL franchise could want, with tons of salary cap room, the number one pick, and let's just say a quarterback that they want to stick with, right? And now the fact that they have to kind of like decide between the two a little bit is the sticking point, and probably, could either have the Chicago Bears ascend in years to come, or have them, continuously mired in the mediocrity that they're already in. Flipping over to the Falcons side, you mentioned coaching. I want to ask you about the Atlanta Falcons, more specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Now, from an outside observer, you see, as you mentioned, Drake London. You've seen Kyle Pitts, who honestly over the last couple of weeks has come alive. And of course, they spent their top 10 pick on Bijan Robinson. So, in your opinion, with Arthur Smith, has it been the coaching as part of the reason why this offense hasn't taken off, or why some of these weapons haven't played the way that they've played? And what is your take on them coming into this game? Where are they at as a football team right now?
Yeah, they're definitely not at the place that I expected them to be right now coming into the season. But when you ask about coaching, and a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, are very, very frustrated, upset, and they're targeting their anger at Arthur Smith. And I mean, you see basically after any single play that doesn't work, right? It's a screen pass and the receiver clearly misses his block, so the guy gets blown up, and it's on Twitter. Everybody's just like, "What kind
we
of?"
don't know anything about that.
Fire Arthur Smith, yeah, and it's just
we don't know anything about that here.
Yeah, it's like 48 times a game, and I'm like, "Are you even watching the game, guys? Are you just firing off that next tweet? Like, chill. It's okay. There's different context to everything that happens in a game. And when I look at this team and I look at the season, I have a hard time believing that it is coaching and not the play of the quarterback, and not just some of the operational issues that the Falcons have had. And frankly, some of the things that are totally outside of a coach's control, like turnovers. The Falcons went into a absolute hurricane in Charlotte, North Carolina, to play the Carolina Panthers, 1-12 at that point. Lowly, Bryce Young, good defense. And they said, all right, we know what type of game this is going to be. We are totally comfortable winning this 9-6 if we have to, even though everybody's frustrated at our offense and it's not scoring points. Like, we just need to win this game. We've got a great defense. They do too, but we've got a slightly better offense. And as long as we don't turn the ball over, we should win this game. We're the better team. And they did that, and they executed that game plan, and then they put the ball in Desmond Ritter's hands for what should have been a one read or throw it out of bounds play, and he tries to make a play at the wrong time and turns the ball over, and the Falcons lose that game. And that is why Desmond Ridder was benched for good, and also indicative of just this season, right? They went into this year, and a lot of people were critical, and this you can, question Arthur Smith on, and said, are you sure? Are you sure Desmond Ridder is the guy? And I don't think that they felt that he was the long-term guy, right? It's a different conversation than what you guys are having about Justin Fields, because Justin Fields' ceiling is way up here and Desmond Ridder's is like right down here. But he did feel that he was good enough in this year, and you could stay cheap at the quarterback position and invest some of this money elsewhere, like in the defense, which has been amazing. And you should also give some credit to the head coach for the improvement on that side of the ball, because he hired the coaches that have really turned that around. And so I just think it's easy to look at an offense that underperforms with players, with fantasy players, frankly, and that's the other part that's really driving this, is people just open up their fantasy apps and see Kyle Pitts had 5.8 points, and they're like, what the heck? Kyle Pitts sucks, get him the ball more. And the way that they wanted this offense to run, I feel like never really came to fruition because they couldn't trust the quarterback. And that's why ultimately I come down on the side of, let's just give him 1 year to say, the one focus you have this offseason is getting the quarterback right, because they had so much work to do to get out from the financial kind of rubble from the last regime. They finally got that this offseason. I think Arthur Smith bet on himself to say, my offense is going to work even with an unproven quarterback. We need to load up the defense, because that is an area that we can't win if we're consistently giving up 28 points a game. They did fix that part. They just missed on the offense. And so if you give him one more offseason, let's see what he can do with it. Can they get the quarterback right, whether that's through the draft or free agency? If they do, this is going to be a very good team, because you are seeing some of the areas in which good teams do perform. The guys in the locker room are incredibly respectful professionals who get it, who have not stopped fighting. He has not lost the locker room in any way, shape, or form. And you do have guys like Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell, who are kind of like Tim Duncan is like the best way to describe their demeanor, their wisdom as athletes. And they speak so highly of Arthur Smith. So for all those reasons, I think you just figure out quarterback, but the coach, I feel pretty good about.
Before we get to final score prediction and we get out of here, I do want to ask you, based off that point. So I've been, in my personal opinion, I don't think the quality of football has been as good this year as it has been in years past. I think that the quarterback play has been fairly functional. I think a lot of people like to point to these backup quarterbacks having success, but if we kind of look around, these guys kind of have the shelf life of 2 weeks, which is very much apropos for a backup quarterback, right? That's what happens when things go wrong. A guy comes in, he throws long relief, he throws 3 or 4 innings, but he can't throw 7 or 8 innings.
Yeah.
I feel like that there's been an exodus of great quarterback play over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think NFL fans are slow to the switch and have gotten spoiled and are used to it. And the fact that they're not seeing it now, I think it is kind of skewing how we view these quarterbacks and their maturation moving forward. So think about it, Will. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've lost Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, even a guy like a Phillip Rivers. Yep. Even an Eli Manning or whatever.
But even like Carson Palmer, even Donovan McNabb, even Mark Bold or Kurt Warner for a while. Just the average quarterbacks were Jay Cutler was better than Derek Carr, right? And
correct.
That's like Alex Smith used to get pointed to as like, this guy can't do anything. Alex Smith would be, could you imagine Alex Smith on the 49ers right now? He would be.
I know. It'd be Brock. It'd be Brock Purdy. It'd be the same.
Tony
situation.
Romo. Didn't even mention Tony Romo, right? Yeah.
I feel like we're a little bit in agreement on this. Where I feel like that the level of quarterback play is functional, but I don't think it's as high as it has been in the last 4 or 5 years. And we've been so spoiled by the Tom Brady's of the world, and even down farther, even the Kurt Warners and Carson Palmers of the world, that from my perspective, even as a Bears fan, and what you're talking about from the Falcons, it really is about how your offense functions and can the quarterback execute within that functional style. to make something happen. Now, of course, there's guys that fall short, but I just think that there's more parity and mediocrity at the quarterback position than ever before. And I'm just trying to take a different grading scale, if you will, on how I'm looking at some of these guys, specifically Justin Fields. It feels like, in your opinion, that Desmond Ridder didn't really match up to that specifically. But do you see what I'm seeing, right? Where if you, let's even throw another name out there. If you brought in Kirk Cousins next year to play on the Falcons,
Yep,
there would be a market improvement on offense, correct?
I totally believe that would happen, because see what I think you're getting at, and follow me with this metaphor because I just thought of it. It may not totally work, but the marriage between a coach and a quarterback matters maybe more than anything, right? And we talk about, we try to say like the coach matters or the quarterback matters. No, it's really just finding the right two guys together. And that could be from a variety of different angles. It could be schematically what the coach does best, his wheelhouse in terms of play design, or his background and what he learned coming up through the ranks just matches what that quarterback does best. And so they are harmonious and it all kind of works together, right? And then you could just have, all right, from a vibes perspective, you get just Ben Roethlisberger with Dan Campbell, and those two guys are just drinking beers and doing whatever. And like maybe they're just a match made in heaven, right? So there's a lot of different ways that those two can just click, but they have to click. And I think you're seeing some coaches, and this is why the Brock Purdy thing is hilarious to me, because you're right, like it's such a quarterback exodus over the last few years that we're in a little bit of a quarterback valley, it feels like. And yet we all decide we've got this awesome, great storyline of kind of, if you want to make that Tom Brady 2000 like comparison of, all right, a really well-respected coach, although at the time Belichick wasn't that well-respected. He was kind of like, yeah, he's a good defensive mind, not a great head coach kind of thing. But you just have the young player that's maybe protected by the coach and the scheme and what's going on. But man, he's got some of these intangibles and is the golden boy. And yet we're all deciding to kind of be like Brock Purdy. It's just the 49ers. It's just Shanahan. Like, we should celebrate some actually good quarterback play for longer than 2 games. One of those games often involved the Falcons, by the way. So maybe that's part of the magic sauce there as well. But Shanahan is a coach that, and here's the long path to this metaphor, that can kind of like do a custom build, right? He can, if you just give him a box of scraps, he'll build a computer, he'll build a car that really works nicely based on whatever ingredients you give him. And I think Sean McVay is that same way. I think to some degree Mike McDaniel is that way. I think Arthur Smith is that way in some regards. And then you've got others who are just so good at operating the thing if it comes fully baked, right? If you give them a car, they can drive it immediately. They just probably couldn't build it themselves. Or when stuff starts breaking down, they're not going to open the hood and really know just intricately, this is messed up, this is messed up, this is messed up. And so sometimes you get a quarterback like a Justin Fields or a Lamar or a Kyler or somebody like that, and they maybe need a coach who can build something totally unique and customized to that quarterback. And those coaches are few and far between, but I think we're seeing more quarterbacks as we go to this era of elite like athleticism and those traits getting valued more than your prototypical kind of reads the play, does the like game manager stuff on the field. I still think you're seeing a lot of coaches who are used to having a quarterback like that, and you're seeing a disconnect there. But it's a really interesting question that I think is going to color kind of the whole offseason is this debate, figuring it out, what is valuable at the quarterback position now.
No, and to further your metaphor just a little bit, when we're talking about, these customizations with the quarterback, I think it's more about accepting that a lot of these quarterbacks, for all their talents and skills, and even when we talk about the athletic ability of Justin Fields, a lot of these guys are just going to come with flaws and limitations. And I just feel like we were blessed and also spoiled by incredible quarterback play over the last several years. We're just not going to see a lot of Drew Breeses, right? We're just not going to see a ton of Peyton Mannings. We need to wrap our head around that a little bit. And I think that you are onto something, that you can have a successful quarterback in a system, but you have to tailor it to his strengths, try and limit and mitigate the flaws. And I think that's maybe where you get that Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan kind of relationship a little bit. I think that's what Brian Daboll did a great job with Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen's still a great player, but you've seen the interceptions go up a little bit. Even the Patrick Mahomes, who I still think is the best quarterback in the game and should be considered in the class of all those other guys. Well, if you hand him a couple rookie receivers and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and the hourglass on, no offense, Travis Kelce's prime, there's only a couple of grains of sand, in my opinion, left in his prime. Not him being good, in his prime. You see the effect of that, right? So it is something that I think in the NFL that we have to understand that it goes just beyond the quarterback a little bit. And we have been spoiled by some of these guys that honestly made chicken salad out of chicken shit for many years, the Tom Brady's of the world, and realize that there's a little bit more that goes into it. And if you can accept that, then you can kind of look at a quarterback that has some flaws and still feel like that you can succeed with them, instead of it's like, he'll never overcome this, he'll never overcome that, get him out of town. It's something that I personally try and resist as best I can.
And I do think the other part of this is that it's become just a little bit easier to manufacture, I think, offense around the quarterback, right? And I feel like this is maybe the other side of that argument that I was saying about coaches, is just across the league, offense has been up for a long time now. And in some ways, people feel like they can mitigate the weaknesses of a young or a not complete quarterback. And in some ways they can. And I feel like the expansion of offense and just not ease, but just, I guess, the increase of scoring that we've seen around the league, I wonder if that does color the way that we look at some of these quarterbacks, especially the unproven guys, because if you were a standout quarterback, right? If you were Carson Palmer and your talent level was greater than just kind of the run of the mill other quarterbacks, because the position was a little bit more homogenous than I think it is now, your singular talent at that position could maybe raise your offense to where everybody else is scoring like 21 points a game. Now you're scoring 26, which is substantial at that time. So we're sitting here saying, man, Carson Palmer is so good. But now you have these runs where a Josh Dobbs offense can put up 35 points one week, and then he throws 4 picks the next. And it's like, is he great? I don't know. Can he put up 35 points a game, or does he suck? Like, there's just some other factors beyond quarterback play. Whereas earlier, I think with Tom Brady or Drew Brees or, whoever, Matt Ryan, it was easier to say like, wow, yep, I've seen a lot of quarterbacks in the league have to do that thing, and you do it better than them. Now, quarterbacks are asked to do a ton of different things depending on the scheme, and it's just harder, I think, to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I'm just trying to bring perspective to it, especially NFL fans now that want the greatness right now in this moment, because they've seen the greatness before, but greatness is special, doesn't come around very often. You have to appreciate it when it's there, not expect that it's going to continuously continue throughout time and evolve. We got to get out of here, Will. But what's your final score, man? The Falcons need this one, baby. Or do they, to get into the playoffs? Let's be honest, they'd probably be better off if they took a win, but they're going to go into Chicago. What's your final score? The Falcons going to beat the Bears this weekend. What do you got?
So I have been just famously horrible at all score predictions this year. In fact, after weeks of not taking unders involving the Falcons and picking the Falcons to win, I picked the I picked the under last week and the Falcons to lose. Neither of those things happened. So I'm gonna jinx the Falcons. I'm gonna say that they're going to win this one, but I think it's gonna be a pretty close, kind of back and forth, low scoring game, maybe an ugly middle stretch. I'm gonna say like 23-21 Atlanta. The Bears have the ball late with a chance to maybe kick a field goal, and maybe the Windy City lives up to its name.
That's the question. I know that Chicago's getting some weather right now. We're taping this on a Wednesday, so let's all be fair to what we're prognosticating right here in this moment. But yeah, if it is a weather situation, I could see a little bit of a lower scoring game. I'll be honest with you. I kind of think the Falcons have the edge in this one. And when you talked about that defense, I think it's one of the underrated aspects, or one of the underrated units across the NFC. I don't think we talk a lot about, San Francisco's defense, Philadelphia's defense, Dallas's defense. I don't think Atlanta gets enough credit. And I'll be honest with you, I just wish this was a stretch right here for Justin Fields, especially with this Cardinals last week, with the opportunity to play really well, especially last week against a defense that wasn't very good. They got off to a great start, but again, with a lot of things with Justin Fields' career, it's always just been the totality of it, the 4 quarters. It wasn't there in the second half. I think we had 8 3-and-outs in the second half or something along those lines. So as much as I've wanted to have Justin Fields ride into the offseason playing fantastic offensive football, it just really hasn't clicked like that at this time. And it does kind of lend itself from me. I have this weird feeling that the Bears might lose to the Falcons this week. And then this big Bears-Packers matchup this last week, they end the season on a win. And I don't know what to make of myself. So I'll be honest with you, man. I'm also going to go. The Falcons need it really bad right now. And the Bears are still playing for something. There's still plenty to go for in the locker room, but I just don't think they have the consistency right now. So I'm kind of in a similar mode. I'm going to go actually lower. I'm going to go 20-16. I do think the Falcons are going to win. And 16 points for the Chicago Bears offense is not good news for Justin Fields, a dude that I root for, a dude that I like, a dude that I do think you can win with and be successful with. Just for whatever reason, it really just isn't kind of consistently clicking right now the way that I thought it would this late in the season. They might be without Cole Kmet. They're still a little banged up on the offensive line. Those both are not good news for Justin Fields' production. So I might be with you. I think the Falcons are going to come out with a victory there. You guys moved to 8-9. Then who do you guys play? Who's the last week?
New Orleans. So yeah, a nice chance, to potentially get into the playoffs. If Tampa loses the next 2, Atlanta wins the next 2, they'd win the division. If not, some tie break. If Tampa at any point wins another game, the Falcons would have to then kind of be in the wild card situation. But yeah, and they're not in the best shape wild card wise. But yeah, no, 16 points. I mean, that'd be a good day against Atlanta's defense. Atlanta's defense, as you mentioned, has been, a really, really solid unit this year. And I think it's snuck up on a lot of the opponents that Atlanta has played this year. So again, Chicago fans, like Atlanta's defense, I think they've given up 2 touchdowns in the last 5 games total. So this past week, Jonathan Taylor became the first running back to score a rushing touchdown against Atlanta.
Wow.
In week 16. So that's how good they've been. They're a really good unit, and defense travels. So it could 100% be a low scoring afternoon.
Yeah, we just haven't been consistent enough, and that makes it a bad matchup for the Chicago Bears. So I'm a little worried about that offensively. And and 20 points is pretty decent from a defensive standpoint. But you guys, I think, will be able to make enough plays to make it happen. And when you have your kicker, what did he hit 5 field goals last week or something?
Yeah, NFC.
I do think that is a slight edge. If it turns into a field goal fest in Soldier Field, that is advantage Bears. So that could definitely make it a close game, which I think we're both predicting either way. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. But Will McFadden, man, thank you so much for coming on to Believe in Bears. You can follow me at Joey Sports Guy. Thank you so much for listening to us on Sirius XM, on the Believe Network, wherever you get your podcasts, or checking us out right here on Sports Talk Chicago. Will, man, toss out your socials. Tell people how they can check out all your great content. Man, great to see you, my friend. I'm glad we got this in before 2023. Here's to the next time in 2024.
Yeah, heck yeah, dude. It's always a pleasure to pod with you. So it was great to do so once again. Everybody can follow me on Twitter at Will McFadden. I need to be better about learning my threads social, I guess, but you can check me out there too. You can find my written work at thefalcoholic.com. And check us out, Believe in Falcons, same name. Got a YouTube channel if that's how you prefer to listen to podcasts, or you can find us Spotify, iTunes, any of the great places. So yeah, that's where I'm at these days.
Yeah, and if we head into an off season where Justin Fields and the Bears are talking to the Atlanta Falcons about possibly making a deal, Bears fans is a great place to go to get some inside perspective all through the off season. Definitely give Will McFadden a follow at the very least, and then check out his work all throughout the season. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Be well, be safe. Please be good to each other. Remember, it's the end of the year. It's 2023. Hope springs eternal. Hope springs anew in 2024. So what better reason to be good to each other? Bear down, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back next year.